Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. Today we continue with Rerum Novarum, written by Pope Leo XIII in 1891.
From this follows the obligation of the cessation from work and labor on Sundays and certain holy days. The rest from labor is not to be understood as mere giving way to idleness, much less must it be an occasion for spending money and for vicious indulgence, as many would have it to be, but it should be rest from labor, hallowed by religion. Rest, combined with religious observances, disposes man to forget about, for a while, the business of his everyday life, to turn his thoughts to things heavenly, to the worship which he so strictly owes to the eternal Godhead. It is this above all which is the reason and motive of Sunday rest, a rest sanctioned by God's great law of the ancient covenant. Remember thou, keep holy the Sabbath day, and taught to the world by his own mysterious rest after the creation of man. He rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. If we turn now to things external and material, the first of all to secure is to save unfortunate working people from the cruelty of men of greed, who use human beings as mere instruments for money-making. It is neither just nor human so to grind men down with excessive labor as to stupefy their minds and wear out their bodies. Man's powers, like his general nature, are limited, and beyond these limits he cannot go. His strength is developed and increased by use and exercise, but only on the condition of due intermission and proper rest. Daily labor, therefore, should be so regulated as not to be protracted over longer hours than strength admits. How many and how long the intervals of rest should be must depend on the nature of the work, on circumstances of time and place, and the health and strength of the workman. Those who work in mines and quarries and extract coal, stone, and metals from the bowels of the earth should have shorter hours in proportion as their labor is more severe and trying to health. Then again, the season of the year should be taken into account, for not unfrequently a kind of labor is easy at one time, which another time is intolerable or exceedingly difficult. Finally, work which is quite suitable for a strong man cannot rightly be required from a woman or a child. And in regard to children, great care should be taken not to place them in workshops and factories until their bodies and minds are sufficiently developed. For, just as very rough weather destroys the buds of spring, so does too early an experience of life's hard toil blight the young promise of a child's faculties, and render any true education impossible. Women, again, are not suited for certain occupations. A woman is by nature fitted for home work, and is that which is best adapted at once to preserve her modesty and to promote the good bringing up of children and the well-being of the family. As a general principle, it may be laid down that a workman ought to have leisure and rest proportionate to the wear and tear of his strength, for waste of strength must be repaired by cessation from hard work. In all agreements between masters and workpeople, there is always the condition expressed or understood that there should be allowed proper rest for soul and body. To agree in any other sense would be against what is right and just, for it can never be just or right to require on the one side, or to promise on the other, the giving up of those duties which a man owes to God and to himself. We now approach a subject of great importance, and one in respect of which, if extremes are to be avoided, right notions are absolutely necessary. Wages, as we are told, are regulated by free consent. Therefore, the employer, when he pays what was agreed upon, has done his part, and seemingly is not called upon to do anything beyond. The only way, it is said, in which injustice might occur would be if the master refused to pay the whole of the wages, or if the workman should not complete the work undertaken. In such cases, the public authority should intervene to see that each obtains his due, but not under any other circumstances. To this kind of argument, a fair man will not easily or entirely assent. It is not complete, for there are important considerations which it leaves out of account together. To labor is to exert oneself for the sake of procuring what is necessary for the various purposes of life, and chief of all, for self-preservation. In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread. Hence, a man's labor necessarily bears two notes or characters. First of all, it is personal, inasmuch as the force which acts is bound up with the personality and is the exclusive property of him who acts, and further, what was given to him for his advantage. Secondly, man's labor is necessary, for without the result of labor a man cannot live, and self-preservation is a law of nature which is wrong to disobey. Now, were we to consider labor merely insofar as it is personal, doubtless it would be within the workman's right to accept any rate of wages whatsoever, for it is in the same way that he is free to work or not, so he is free to accept a small wage, or even none at all. But our conclusion must be very different if, together with the personal element in a man's work, we consider the fact that work is also necessary for him to live. These two aspects of his work are separable in thought, but not in reality. The preservation of life is the bounded duty of one and all. To be wanting therein is a crime. It follows necessarily that each one has a natural right to procure what is required in order to live, and the poor can procure in no other way than by what they can earn through their work. Let the working man and the employer make free agreements, and in particular let them agree freely as to the wages. Nevertheless, there underlies a dictate of natural justice more imperious and ancient than any bargain between man and man, namely, the wages ought not to be insufficient to support a frugal and well-behaved wage-earner. If through necessity or fear of worse evil the workman accept harder conditions because an employer or contractor will afford him no better, he is made the victim of force and injustice. In these and similar questions, however, such as, for example, the hours of labor in different trades, the sanitary precautions to be observed in factories and workshops, etc., in order to supersede undue interference on the part of the state, especially as circumstances, times, and localities differ so widely, it is advisable that recourse be had to societies or boards, such as we shall mention presently, or to some other mode of safeguarding the interests of the wage earners, the state being appealed to should circumstances require for its sanction and protection. If the workman's wages be sufficient to enable him comfortably to support himself, his wife, and his children, he will find it easy, if he is a sensible man, to practice thrift, and he will not fail, by cutting down expenses, to put by some little savings and thus secure a modest source of income. Nature itself would urge him to this. We have seen that the great labor question cannot be solved save by assuming a principle that private ownership must be held sacred and inviolable. The law, therefore, should favor ownership, and its principle should be to induce as many as possible of the people to become owners. Many excellent results will follow from this, and first of all, property will certainly become more equitably divided, for the result of civil change and revolution has been to divide cities into two classes separated by a wide chasm. On the one side, there is a party which holds power because it holds wealth, which has in its grasp the whole of labor and trade, which manipulates for its own benefit and its own purposes all the sources of supply, and which is not without influence even in the administration of the commonwealth. On the other side, there is the needy and powerless multitude, sick and sore in spirit, and ever ready for disturbance. If working people can be encouraged to look forward to obtaining a share in the land, the consequence will be that the gulf between vast wealth and sheer poverty will be bridged over, and the respective classes will be brought nearer to one another. A further consequence will result in the great abundance of the fruits of the earth. Men always work harder and more readily when they work on that which belongs to them. Nay, they learn to love the very soil that yields in response to the labor of their hands, not only food to eat, but an abundance of good things for themselves and those that are dear to them. That such a spirit of willing labor would add to the produce of the earth and to the wealth of the community is self-evident, And a third advantage would spring from this. Men would cling to the country in which they were born, for no one would exchange his country for a foreign land if his own afforded him the means of living a decent and happy life. These three important benefits, however, can be reckoned only on provided that a man's means not be drained and exhausted by excessive taxation. The right to possess private property is derived from nature, not from man, and the state has the right to control its use in the interests of the public good alone, but by no means to absorb it altogether. The state would, therefore, be unjust and cruel if, under the name of taxation, it were to deprive the property owner of more than is fair.